morning. Coming back from that first segment, we've got the Badger, Delegate Michael Heitz.
Good morning.
David Valente.
Good morning.
In studio, by the way, he's in the Bill Stubblefield chair. The Admiral is listening, but not present and accounted for.
Making sure we're doing things right.
A little pressure.
Big shoes to fill. Not literally.
Tall chair.
Tall chair to sit in. Yeah. He is the longest tenured member of our crew, Mr. Michael Carl.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good.
Nice to see those Cardinals have turned things around.
They scored 8 runs in the first 2 games against the division-leading Cubs and won.
Yeah, that's good.
And then they got shut out twice in the second 2 games.
That's baseball.
Yeah.
Right, that's baseball. Mr. Larry Schultz, attorney at law.
Good morning.
Via telephone, Joseph Joey Torts Ferretti. Good morning, Joe.
It must be nice to have a baseball team with some promise.
I don't know. We just picked up a left-handed reliever off the waiver wire. The Cubs cut. His ERA is 6.39. I'm encouraged. How about you, Joe?
Oh, yeah. He fit right in with the Pirates bullpen.
Yeah. They've actually pitched pretty well. I think they have one of the first or second in a lot of the metrics in regards to pitching, but the hitting is just not there. Right?
Historically bad.
It literally is, yeah. It was this date, looking at my Today in History, and just a year ago, I'm sure you all recall this quite clearly. President Joe Biden and current President Donald Trump met for their now infamous debate. And that led to Joe Biden's withdrawal from the election on July the 21st. What stands out in your mind about that debate the most, Badger? If you can call that a debate.
I think the comment that Trump made, I don't know what he just said, and I don't think he does either.
Yeah. How about you, Larry Schultz? What stands out most from that night for you?
Yeah, it was a terrible performance by Joe Biden. I'm pretty sure Donald Trump is capable of eclipsing that as a moment for American embarrassment, if he hasn't already.
You never disappoint, Larry. That's all I can say on that one. How about you, Michael Carl?
Well, I going into the debate, I thought Biden was losing his competence, so it just confirmed what I already believed.
Mr. Valente?
Yeah, I think a lot of us were anticipating the debate and saying where Joe Biden was. We knew he was losing his faculties to an extent, but to the extent that it was displayed in that debate, especially the first half of that debate, was shocking to the average voter. It was like, wow, that's our president. Like, so. He fumbles around for almost another month and gets COVID and decides to drop out and uses that as the excuse. So, it was just the level to where Joe Biden had fallen at that point.
Mr. Ferretti.
For years, for decades, the Kennedy-Nixon debate from 1960 was studied a lot in terms of the effect of that debate on the electorate. And I think the Biden-Trump debate of last year has eclipsed that in terms of study that will take place long term, and perhaps will change forever the way debates are either conducted or if they're conducted at all.
Fair point. I remember texting my brother-in-law that night that the last time I'd seen something beaten that badly, Sarah McLachlan was singing a sad song while they were raising money for dogs.
I thought it was the network debut of The Passion of the Christ.
We're ready for issue number 1, and for that we go to our leadoff hitter, Mr. Ferretti.
Rob, the well-known equation goes like this. The Trump tax cuts are, there's a proposal to codify those and to have more money spent for immigration enforcement and the defense of the nation at the expense of Medicaid coverage. The proposed Medicaid cuts would be the largest in the 60-year history of the program. So the question I have this morning concerns what our elected representatives are going to do about the detrimental effects of these Medicaid cuts on West Virginia. And it is undeniable, in my opinion, that these effects on West Virginians are real. And I can give you a case study, and that's Hampshire Memorial Hospital. Hampshire County has one primary care physician for every 3,800 people that live in that county. That's twice the national average in terms of the number of people who should be served by a primary care physician. It has an 8-bed ER at the hospital, and that emergency room has 11,000 patient encounters every year. If you do the math, that's approximately 30 patients per day coming through that ER. People show up there with anything from a toothache to heart fibrillation. According to Rich Sutphin, president of the West Virginia Rural Health Association, there are 22 similar rural hospitals across the state of West Virginia. He claims 5 of them will risk immediate closure if the president's budget bill passes. Rural hospitals and their leaders are currently lobbying people like Capito and Justice, Senator Hawley, Senator Murkowski, and Senator Collins, who are seen as skeptics of the budget bill. The hospitals are currently lobbying these folks to vote no. And their efforts now are more intense since the budget bill in the Senate is actually doing more harm to the Medicaid program than the House bill. We know West Virginia is more dependent on Medicaid than any other state. Over 500,000 of our residents are on Medicaid currently. Medicaid provides the option for basic medical screenings, health maintenance, and all the things that people utilize to maintain their health. Oral health advances in West Virginia are because of Medicaid. According to the West Virginia Oral Health Coalition, 79% of dental complaints that unfortunately show up in the ERs, such as those at Hampshire County, can simply be treated by a dentist if Medicaid funds are available. Addiction treatment, which we know West Virginia needs, unfortunately, is also affected by these Medicaid cuts. 34,000 West Virginians currently rely on Medicaid for addiction recovery services. And 60% of live births in our state are covered by Medicaid. And that includes well baby exams. And interestingly, another bad statistic for West Virginia, we lead the nation in the highest rate of people with disabilities. 1 out of 3 families in West Virginia has a disabled person living in the home. And the West Virginia Center for Excellence with Disabilities claims that there are free services available due to Medicaid, and there are 6 clinics statewide helping 340,000 people with disabilities. These clinics employ over 100 people. And if these Medicaid cuts go through, this can all go away. Colin just put up on the television a handout from Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina. He sent out this handout just on Monday to his Senate colleagues to show how states such as West Virginia will be affected if these Medicaid cuts go through. And you can see from that $6.2 billion forfeited in West Virginia alone. And if you run the math on a per capita basis, West Virginia will suffer the impacts more than any other state in the nation. Currently, the West Virginia Hospital Association and various medical groups and coalitions for the needy, the disabled, and children are all lobbying hard for our congressional delegation to turn this ship around. And as I pointed out, Tom Tillis is trying to do it in the Senate with this handout. So the question I have this morning, and it's a 2-part question, given the impacts that will undeniably occur in West Virginia if this budget bill passes, what should we expect from our people in Congress if they have been elected to represent the interest of West Virginia? And perhaps, unfortunately, the second question I have is, what do we predict they will actually do when asked to vote on this budget bill?
All right, Joe, good lead off. Let's begin with the Badger, Delegate Michael Haidt, who's Vice Chair of Health and Human Resources in the state legislature. Mike, all yours.
Well, first of all, I would say it's all concerning. However, I hate as a legislature when we start trying to fix something when we don't know the extent of the problem yet. So this is a bill that is proposed at the federal level. These are huge cuts, and will they affect West Virginia? Absolutely. But if we start trying as legislators to fix the problem before we know the scope of it, we're just going to mess things up. So until this is a bill that is actually passed and signed into law, we really don't know what the extent of this issue is. So as legislators, I don't want to do anything right now. I want to see what our elected officials at the federal level do, whether Capito and Justice have any pull, and whether or not they change any parts of this bill, whether there's any changes made to it, amendments made to it, and what the full scope of it is. I have heard here this past week that the parliamentarian has gotten involved, the Senate parliamentarian has gotten involved over this bill and what can actually be done, and some of the things in the bill that are not able to be done for parliamentary reasons. I don't know why, but so if we don't know what we're dealing with, the legislature itself should stay out of it. At this state level, legislature should stay out of it until we have a hard and fast bill. It is concerning that we could lose that kind of Medicaid money. I've said before that we don't know exactly, we're losing Medicaid money that was going to specific areas, or are we losing the expansion portion of Medicaid that happened under the Biden administration when he expanded from I think that 75-25 level of reimbursement to the 90-10 on the federal side. So is that what we're losing in addition to some other things? I don't know. I want to see the whole bill as it is passed before I start making decisions on how far forward or against it I am.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes, there's a couple of things that are a little concerning here. One of them is the bill put forth by the Senate, which actually deepens the cuts to Medicaid and some other programs. I am afraid that what Mike was just describing is equivalent to not preparing for a predicted tornado until the winds get real high. And I'm going in my basement as soon as they tell me that it's coming. As soon as we get close, I'm not going to wait to see if my car blows across the front yard and then decide. And I understand why Mike is saying what he's saying, but one of the things that's, no matter what your solution is, we need more money, and we're going to need it fast. Now, I don't know where we're going to get that money, but that at least needs to be a focus of every level of our government because, and this is an important point that gets lost in this, when a hospital in a rural area closes, they're called critical access hospitals for a reason. They are the place where you can go and at least get emergency room care at the moment before perhaps being shipped to a bigger place, like in our case, Morgantown or Winchester. If you close the hospital, then I don't care how good, if you live in that town, I don't care how good your insurance is. The hospital's going to be closed for you too. And so when you have a heart attack in Romney, are you going to, if that hospital would close, I have no reason to think it necessarily will, but are you going to be up for a 3-hour car ride, a 3-hour ambulance ride to Morgantown, or 2.5 hours while you're teetering between life and death with a condition that it could at least be modified if there was a critical access hospital in your town? The other thing we're also missing with regard to these hospital closures, and by the way, the number I've been hearing most recently is not 5 but 7, one of which serves 6 or 7 counties in this state. So as bad as it will be for Morgan and Hampshire, let's say, it's going to be much worse down in the center of the state, as many things it turns out are. But one of the difficulties is you cut off everybody's health care. And so, and by the way, in Hampshire County, I was just reading, you know where the hospital ranks as employer? They're number 2 in the county. So on top of everything else, the whole bunch of people are going to lose their jobs. And so you're talking about some very serious hammers being applied. It's all funding. And we need to at least be discussing, maybe you can't pass a bill now, but we need to at least be discussing, if this happens, where are we going to get the money? We're already getting an awful lot from the feds, and if they take this away, it's not so they can give it back to us. We better start thinking about where we can get the money.
Michael Carl.
All of the criticism of the proposed cuts absolutely ignore the fact, the absolute fact, that there's all kinds of fraud, waste, and abuse in the use of the current funding for this program and for most government programs, particularly at the federal level. I can't give you, the amount, but there is no doubt that hundreds of millions of dollars are wasted of federal budget money, and that's why the cuts are proposed. Now, once again, what the amount ought to be is something that I can't say, but based on my lifetime observation of federal government spending, there is huge amount of waste, and some cuts are appropriate without hurting services at all.
And do you predict that that's what will take place, Mike? Because that's the real question here. With this bill passing, do you believe it will only hurt those who are being affected by the waste? Because that's Joe's question.
Well, that needs to happen. I agree, and I think it can happen if the the follow up, not just how much to cut, but the actual follow up and reallocation of funding and the monitoring of its spending is improved. And I'm hoping that because that problem is what motivates the cut, that it will also motivate a follow up oversight.
Mr. Valente.
Yeah, to Mike's point, Mike Height, his point, I don't expect the legislature to start crafting legislation to address this yet. I don't expect that. I do expect discussions, and I'm sure you guys have been having discussions about the possibilities of this stuff. What I do expect is that the Department of Health and Human Resources here in West Virginia is making plans, because I've, as a federal employee, we've had legislation that is, set to affect our agency. We're having discussions months beforehand, because usually the turnaround time once that legislation's passed is 6 to 9 months, if at best. So we don't, you've got to have a plan in place. So maybe not at the legislative level, but the department level needs to be having those discussions about what do we do when the money dries up. I think it's folly to think that this is all to address fraud, waste, and abuse. The fact that the administration has fired most of the inspector generals of most of the agencies will tell you that this is not so much about fraud, waste, and abuse. The inspector generals are the ones who find the fraud, waste, and abuse. And if they're not there, and I know our agency has not replaced its IG yet, how are we going to identify fraud, waste, and abuse? DOJ didn't do it. They're, $150 billion, if that, and most of that's probably going to get those savings are going to get taken up by the court costs of what the administration has been fighting. I don't find that this budget is going to help people, and it's not going to identify fraud, waste, and abuse. It is a reallocation of resources from the people that are, that it aims to help. And I will, grant anybody the idea that the government is not an efficient organization. But we're transferring government resources from people that it's supposed to help to people that have plenty of help. And the other part of Joe's question is predictions. I'm going to do my best, Mr. T. Predictions, pain.
Clubber Lang, can't beat him.
Baby.
Gotta hope to join him. Joe?
You have to unmute.
Joe?
I'm sorry.
I think I stunned him with the
mute.
Clubber Lang.
You got me on the mute button.
Yeah.
That's the reality. Is it's going to be pain because these cuts are coming, and our congressional delegation, to a person, are all going to vote for them, despite the detrimental effects that West Virginia is going to suffer. Shelley Moore Capito has to run in 18 months. She doesn't want a primary opponent who's going to be well-funded and supported by the president. She's going to vote for this. Jim Justice is going to wring his hands about it, but he's going to vote for what Trump wants. Riley Moore was already on the House floor extolling the virtues of the budget bill and claiming this is just only the beginning of the cuts that are coming. And I don't know what Congresswoman Miller does. I just don't know. Sorry. So my concern is, Mike, I understand it's difficult to anticipate what the effects are going to be of this budget bill in West Virginia. But what I do know is when hospitals close, they don't come back. There's no redoing the issue with hospitals. The professionals leave, and they're not coming back to West Virginia, and the hospital stays closed. And communities like Hampshire County will not have the source of primary care that they rely upon. And unfortunately, they rely upon the ER because, as I indicated, there's not enough doctors in that county. So those are the effects that West Virginia is going to feel. And while we're concerned about fraud, waste, and abuse, CVS just agreed to pay $95 million as part of a lawsuit because they were caught overbilling Medicare. The whistleblower who came forward with the case and the evidence was able to show CVS was part of the waste, fraud, and abuse. And that's an indication that we can do two things at the same time. We can fund Medicare. We can avoid cuts to Medicare, but we can ferret out the waste, fraud, and abuse. So I would propose that we do the same thing with Medicaid, that we just don't institute these draconian cuts and have states like West Virginia suffer, but that we actually direct our efforts to finding out who is bilking Medicaid and get it to stop so that we have more resources to people who need them, like the West Virginia residents. So I simply wanted to point out this morning that while these effects on West Virginia will be impactful and out of proportion perhaps to many other states in the country, our elected representatives are going to go along with it. And I'm just wondering how that's going to play long term.
Mike, was there any discussion of this during the interim session?
Actually, we discussed some of this during the regular session. There was discussions about this in finance. And like I said, it was determined then, how do we fix what we don't know what we're fixing? How do we budget for more money if we don't know how much money we're talking about? If you don't know what the cuts are, I understand what Larry's saying. You want to prepare for the coming storm, but how much do you prepare if you don't really know what's coming? And this is not something. And a storm, in your analogy, is an emergency. I don't know that this is a timing emergency, because even if this bill goes into effect, when or is passed, when does it actually go into effect? And how much time does the legislature at the state level have to make changes before it actually goes into effect? And that's the key.
Joe, good stuff, as always. Great job leading off the program. You got 6 minutes, then try to unmute yourself in time, sir. We break for the top of the hour. At that point, Mr. Valente and Mr. Height are on the clock. This is Talk Radio, WR Martinsburg and TV 10. Back with more after these. Let's welcome back our co-host for the Friday Five here. That includes Mr. Ferretti via telephone. Also in studio, attorney at law Lauren Schultz.
Great to be here.
Attorney at law and longest tenured member of our crew, Michael Carl.
Great to be here.
That's the law firm this morning of Ferretti, Schultz, and Carl, I guess. And the Badger, Delegate Michael Height.
Good morning, sir.
David Valente is up in a moment here. Just a plug for the noon show today with the Sports Mix. They're doing a Fun Friday. These are fun shows that they do a couple times a month when the opportunity presents itself. They're doing greatest sports nicknames today, and that can include for an individual player, Colin tells me, or for a unit of a team. Like, for instance, I've got Mean Joe Green from the Steelers and the Steel Curtain Defense, two great nicknames in the history of Pittsburgh sports. What do you got, Mr. Height?
I liked Boog Powell. Boog.
Mike Carl?
Yeah.
I like cards. I can't say why.
All right. Mr. Valente, what's your favorite sports nickname?
The French Connection.
Oh, yeah.
Gilbert Perreault, Rene Robert, and Rick Martin.
Yeah, buddy.
Buffalo Sabres.
French Connection. Larry?
Mookie Wilson. I don't really know too much about him, but I always thought that was a funny nickname.
How about you, Joe Ferretti?
Oh, I'm going to reach back. Jim Mudcat Grant.
Oh, the Mudcat.
Yeah.
The Mudcat's a good one. Mark the Bird Fidrich used to talk to the baseball, right? He had that one great season.
Goose Gossage.
Goose is another good one.
The Goose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we've got issue number 2, and in the Bill Stubblefield seat, it's Mr. David Valente.
All right. Good morning, everybody. So let's go back to earlier this week. We have the attack with Iran. Actually, this weekend, the attack with Iran. For the life of me, I thought that Pete Hegseth was the Secretary of Defense, but everything that's happened since the initial war with Israel and Iran, it feels like maybe Linda McMahon is more involved in the Secretary of Defense, because it feels like political theater, that what we saw with the attacks on Iran. You see Iran or Israel attempting to blow up several nuclear facilities within the borders of Iran. They get the United States to and Iran responds and blows up several sites within Tel Aviv and Haifa and other cities within Israel. Then the United States responds with their bunker busters at Fordo, and there's conflicting reports. The intelligence is mixed. In fact, there was an intelligence briefing last night where the Democrats say that the capabilities of Iran's nuclear facilities weren't impacted all that much, and the Republicans are saying it was a complete knockout. The Iranians, for what they say, the American actions, the bunker busters did not have the depth to impact the Fordo facility. Lacking depth, I think, is something that Melania and Stormy Daniels can relate to.
Is this Larry Schultz's turn or David Valente's?
Holy cow.
Wow.
I've been saving that one. Sorry. But,
Shouldn't have.
honestly, even the response from Iran, where they contact us and say, "Hey, we're going to be hitting these places. Get your troops out of there." These are so telegraphed. It reminds me of pro wrestling. Like, this whole exercise has been nothing but pro wrestling. Even the unhinged, between match interviews with Donald Trump dropping more F-bombs than we actually dropped on Iran. We're in a situation that I think we're beyond incredulity. I think we're on it's a steroids version of Steve Bannon's flood the zone with excrement. But really, what did the attack on Iran accomplish, and how long are we going to be till we're 2 weeks away from Iran having a nuclear weapon again? And is this all just political theater to save face for 3 different leaders: Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump, and the Ayatollah Khamenei?
Mike Carl, you're up first.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Well, I don't respect the lowball reporting about what happened. I have total confidence that what happened was very significant, and I think it will, number one, prevent nuclear, attacks by Iran for a long time, and I think it will ultimately lead to the the change of their political leadership, partly because of the age of people in charge right now, but mostly because of the effect of the Trump bombing. And so it's just politics that's trying to undermine that, because they hate the fact that Trump should be recognized as having done the right thing and been effective.
So you say pay no attention to that Defense Department leak, Mike?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Schultz.
Yeah. I think it was largely political theater. We can't know that for sure until the intelligence, such as it is complete. One thing that is completely gathered. One thing, though, that's very interesting was the photographs that I've now seen of a line of freight trucks lined up outside the Fordo facility 2 days before these bombs ever fell. Now, I guess they could have been ordering a whole bunch of pizzas for the people who work there, but something tells me they were all pointed away from the facility. So my guess is they were hauling something away. Well, what could it be? Well, one of the things that almost certainly was not affected by this was the enriched uranium that Iran already has, which is capable of making a nuclear weapon. They put that enriched uranium in small canisters about the size of a scuba tank. Now, when I see 16 big trucks and 400 kilos of material in scuba tanks, something's not adding up. So what else were they hauling away from there? What other central repair devices? That's a question for the intelligence folks, but there's no mention anywhere when they talk about a total obliteration of what was in those trucks. And whatever was in those trucks was probably being put in those trucks, so it did not get obliterated. There was no talk about, hey, we blew the trucks up too. I don't think that ever happened. So, there's a lot of reason to be very concerned that Iran, while maybe harmed in some ways by this, can still come back in a relatively brief period of time with a nuclear weapon. And again, sort of like, hospital closures, that's not something you want to find out after they've already done it. It would be nice to know they're doing it while they're doing it so you can make some preparations, and perhaps another strike would be in order at that time. I would also say this. They had a deal where they could inspect that facility, and Donald Trump blew it up in 2018. So, oh, geez, we don't know what the Iranians are going to do. Yeah, we sure don't. And why don't we? Because we walked away from the JCPOA. I can't think of what that acronym stands for.
Coordinated Plan of Action.
Yeah, Joint Coordinated Plan of Action. Thank you, David. We walked away from that in 2018 after President Obama got it arranged in 2015.
Larry, you get 2 minutes for cross-subjecting, by the way. You have to serve that in the penalty box. Mr. Haidt, go right ahead. Larry's like, what'd I do?
Well, first of all, I think we walked away because Iran was not complying with the stipulations of the deal. Could we inspect that facility? Yeah, but under their conditions. After they lined up all the trucks and moved all the stuff out of there, then we can come inspect. So I think you make a good point. There is some concern that the enriched uranium was moved before the bombings. I'm sure there's intelligence people on the ground to know where all of that stuff went. But what was destroyed, hopefully, is the ability to further enrich it to a point where it would be used for a nuclear weapon. I don't know that it's enriched to that point yet. I think they're continuing to try to do that. But that facility is gone. I think the important thing is that this sent a message to Iran that we are not the Obama and Biden administration. This is the Trump administration, And when we tell you we're going to do something, when we draw a line in the sand, that we are going to effectively stand behind that line in the sand. And when last week when he gave them 2 weeks, it didn't turn out to be 2 weeks. I think there was bombing in Turkey or something like that may have escalated things. So I think this administration is just, as we're fed up, we're not going to negotiate anymore, because you don't negotiate in good faith. And we're sick and tired of you playing games. We've told you there is not going to be nuclear weapons in Iran. We meant it. And this is the consequences of you not complying.
Mr. Ferretti.
Well, this whole to-do over the effectiveness of this bombing and everything that's sucking up all the oxygen now is just silliness. The genesis of that issue is Trump getting out on television and talking about complete obliteration even before the B-2 bombers had returned to Missouri. He had to get out there and say that. And the initial Defense Intelligence Agency report called that statement into question. Now, I'm sorry, that's newsworthy. When the president's own administration comes out with an initial report and says, hey, we may not have been as effective as we wanted to be with the bombing, and we weren't as effective as the president portrayed this. So that is newsworthy, and I think worthy of further discussion. And we'll await the later reports to see what the effectiveness of the bombing actually was. But the bottom line here is that there was an agreement in place in 2015, and according to the International Atomic Energy Association, which is a consortium of international inspectors, there had been no major violations by Iran in the 28 months that agreement was in place. Now, President Trump tore it up, and with regard to him doing what he says, he said at the time he's going to have a better deal in place with Iran. Well, that never materialized. We had no deal in place, and Iran went on their merry way in enriching uranium. And that brought us to the brink where we had to bomb them, which entails certain risks. Now, perhaps we were lucky, and it's not going to go any further. We'll see. With sleeper cells in this country, you just have to wait and hope. But the bottom line here is, I will put a positive spin on this. There is clear escalation domination that Israel enjoys right now in the Middle East. All those proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, they've all been degraded. And Israel can fly over Iraq at their leisure without any resistance from Iran. They can fly over there and run sorties and do whatever they want to do because Iran has no resistance capability. So this is an opportunity now for the Trump administration, in conjunction with Israel, to strike real good bargains with Iran, because Iran is in a weakened state and perhaps the weakest they've been in decades. So there is an opportunity here. I hope we seize it.
Thank you, Mr. Valente. You get the final word.
Yeah, I think part of the issue here is that when this all started going down, the Iranians were able to get their enriched uranium out of Fordo. So even if the bunker buster was supremely successful, it didn't take out the capabilities, the what's there. And it may not be nuclear weapon grade, but it is dirty bomb grade. So, and there are, Iran does have proxies throughout the Middle East, and I don't think sleeper cells are, we'll see anything with sleeper cells within the United States. I just don't. I don't think they want to operate in that level at this point. But it's interesting because Israel has probably better intelligence on Iran than Iran has on its own self at this point. They seem to know everything, but they didn't know that these things are being moved. Like, how do you miss that? How do you miss this long line of trucks being moved from that facility? You wouldn't need a bunker buster to take that out.
Just hit the trucks.
You got to just hit one of the trucks and then just hit the first truck and just have a fun day with the rest of them. So I just a lot of this, what we're seeing from this action, just doesn't add up.
On that note, we move on to issue number 3 and Delegate Michael Haidt, the Badger.
Yeah, we're going to stay with this particular topic. And last week, I said that Iran had 2 weeks, and that didn't pan out to be true. That we did the bombings. Since those bombings, I've heard a lot of people, especially from the left, yelling and screaming about how unconstitutional this is, and that the Trump administration had no authority to bomb a foreign country, additional calls for impeachment, and the like. And I'm just wondering, what was the difference between these Trump bombings and the Obama bombings of several foreign countries, and the Biden bombings of several foreign countries? And I'm not just talking about Afghanistan that we're at war with. I'm talking about Syria and Yemen and the like, and the many drone strikes that Obama had ordered. So what is the difference, and why is it that the left found those to be okay and not impeachment worthy, and this particular bombing of Iran was?
90 seconds apiece. Larry Schultz, you go first.
I'm not positive about this, but I'm pretty sure that Obama and Biden consulted with the Congress of the United States. One of the things Donald Trump blew off was any consultation with the Congress of the United States.
That's absolutely not true.
Okay, so apparently they recognized a clear and present danger that needed to be addressed, and there wasn't time to do that. That's what Mr. Trump is saying as to why he didn't do that. So I don't recall anyone, and I don't know enough about those bombing strikes to be able to answer your question fully, but this was a thing where this cropped up because Trump pulled us out of those investigations, and all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, they've enriched the uranium to dirty bomb levels, and now we need to stop them from being able to enrich the uranium further. I'm not clear that succeeded anyway. Whereas I think the things that, those were kind of strategic questions about stopping their advance to a nuclear weapon that they could deliver on Israel or somebody else. I think that the earlier situations were much more in the moment, stop them, they're killing people, and we need to stop them now. That wasn't exactly the definition we were given by the Trump administration. So I do think there are differences.
Mr. Carl.
The President of the United States, whomever it is the constitutional commander-in-chief and the leader of and the decider of military actions by the U.S. military. And so I am completely supportive of what Trump has done in this, and these critics are just, dreaming and don't understand the Constitution of the United States, and I'll defer to the U.S. Supreme Court if there's anybody who wants to bring a case about it.
Mr. Ferretti. Go ahead, Mike. Hold on, Joe, 1 second.
Were you also supportive of the Obama administration and the Biden administration when they did their bombings?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Joe, you go.
Yeah, Mike Carl's right. The criticisms echo from the Republican criticisms that were levied at President Obama with the drone strikes in the various countries that he conducted those in. This is all coming from that authorization for the use of military force that was passed by Congress in response to 9/11 in 2001. Ever since then, the presidents have been acting with impunity in terms of their use of the military. And they've been ignoring the War Powers Act, which requires congressional authorization for conducting war. And they use all the niceties about and the semantics about, well, this isn't really a war. This is a police action, or this is some sort of action to to forestall the development of nuclear weapons and what have you. Look, to Obama's credit, he campaigned in 2012 when he was running against Romney. He campaigned to revise, amend, update that authorization for the use of military force that presidents have been relying upon. He put that before Congress, and as usual, Congress did nothing. So that authorization still remains in effect, and it will continue to be cited and used by presidents to conduct these military operations without congressional authority. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I'll tell you, someday we're going to get in trouble with a president who perhaps extends his authority too far.
David Valente.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I was against a lot of these bombings, especially the one in Yemen that Obama did that killed the son of a guy who, yes, who was an American citizen. We killed him first, and then his son was killed in a separate bombing. An American citizen extrajudicial killing. I think Obama should have been impeached over that one. I have problems with us attacking countries without a declaration of war. I was not a fan of the Syria bombings. We have gotten to a point in American history where I think we are defaulting to the might rather than the right, and we are. I think, Joe, you said there may be a president that will take it too far. I think we've got him right now, and that will take any offense, any failed negotiation as a threat to America, and use any opportunity to attack.
Back to you, Mike Kite, for the final word. You have a minute and a half.
Yeah, I want consistency. And I can appreciate your words, David. That you were offended by the left's authorization of bombings as well as the right's. And I think to Larry's point, the right, when we complained about Obama's bombings, it was about the killing of a U.S. citizen. It wasn't about the bombings themselves. It was about the use of bombings on a U.S. citizen, and that was the unconstitutionality. That's the step too far that I believe the right felt at that point. It wasn't about the bombings. I think the right was always okay in the Biden and the Obama administration about them taking military action. It's just now that it is Trump and it is the right that irritates me when I hear so many people from the left, especially those in Congress, who are now standing up and wringing their hands, clutching their pearls, because the president is taking military action when their president took the same kind of military action over and over again. And I think Ferretti makes a great point that this use of military authorization, the Congress has abdicated once again their own authority, and they need to bring it back if they want to do something about this.
And that's
Amen.
the right way to wrap it up, Mike, which was one of your topics a couple of weeks ago, that Congress has just given up
Correct.
its own constitutional authority as an equal branch. All right, good work, guys. Larry Schultz, Mike Carl, you're on the clock. We return with more on the program after these. Program note, Friday next week is the 4th of July, so there's no show on the 4th of July, obviously, because the boss gives us a holiday, and we appreciate that. But we will move the Friday show to Thursday of next week. So next Friday, no show, Friday show on Thursday. And I've been told pretty much everybody can make it, so I didn't. I think, Joe, you said you'd be okay, too, if you can unmute yourself for a moment.
Yeah, I did.
All right. Joe, are you using the fancy new microphone you showed off that your daughter's got you as a Father's Day gift?
Not yet. There's a couple different components I need to make that work. So it's still.
Does it have a mute button?
It actually does, Larry.
It needs to be brightly labeled and be flashing red when it's on, I would say.
Yes, with an actual microphone that's called a cough button. Yeah. All right, we are produced by the Sports Doctor, Colin McLaughlin. The Friday 5 includes Joe Ferretti via telephone. Welcome back, Joe.
Thanks.
You're welcome. The Badger, Michael Heitz.
Good morning.
Longest tenured member of our crew, Mr. Michael Carl.
Great to be here.
David Valente in the Bill Stubblefield chair.
Howdy, howdy.
And with issue number 4, attorney at law Lawrence Schultz.
Great to be here.
I can
Will
feel
this-
the joy in your voice.
Will the so-called big beautiful bill be ready for Trump's signature by next Friday? Speaking of the 4th of July, why or why not?
All right, Joe, let's go right to you first.
Boy, there seems to be some rancor in the Senate, Larry, about this bill, and I'm wondering if it's going to get out in time. However, I will never underestimate the influence and the power that President Trump has over Congress, in particular the Republican caucus in the House and the Senate. He has, I stated this months ago, that I thought he would be the most powerful president we've seen in our lifetime. I'll be interested if anybody can disabuse me of that notion, because this individual has these folks under his thumb. And I'll give you an example. There's a congressman from Kentucky, I think his last name is Massey, who had the temerity to come out and, with a lot of Democrats, question the constitutionality of the bombing in Iran. And in a minute, there was an effort by one of the president's powerful political PACs to recruit a candidate to run against Massey. Trump ran to the media and called that congressman a bum, and probably a bunch of other pejoratives, and is lining up opposition to run against him. This is the kind of influence and the kind of almost extortion that the president has over these people who have to run for office, at least on the House side, every 2 years. So I think eventually, I don't know if it'll be by July 4th, but I think eventually the president's going to get what he wants.
Michael Haidt.
Yeah, I think eventually there's going to be a bill that passes. I don't know in its current form if it's going to pass, and I don't think it passes by July 4th. I think there's a lot of discord, even in the Republican ranks, about its current state. So I think there's going to have to be a lot of wheeling and dealing to get everybody on board to get the votes for this to pass. And I don't know that that is going to be able to be done by July 4th. Eventually, I think something passes, but not by July 4th.
Mike Carl.
Well, for a rare moment, I agree more with Joe than Mike.
You're a smart man.
Well, and what you said, I really agree with all of it. I think it's going to happen. My separate issue is sort of embedded in the broader question that this is, but no, I think it's going to happen in time.
Mr. Valente?
I think if it gets passed by July 4th, it's going to be kind of Katie bar the doors as far as pork. They're going to have to buy off enough senators and enough congressmen to get this over the line. So you're going to see pork, whether some of the southern senators who see the Medicaid cuts are able to bring that, get that off the bill. But I think it's going to be a big bill. I don't think it's going to be beautiful. But if it passes by July 4th and gets signed by July 4th, it's going to be a massive bill. I think, my heart of hearts, I think it's going to be difficult for them to get it to July 4th, just because having to reconcile the versions of the House and the Senate. I think that's going to take some time and a lot of wrangling, but that's probably we're going to see even more of the pork being added to reconcile the bill.
Larry Schultz, back to you.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Can I add something to the debate here? Because this mystifies me. When it comes to this budget bill, the one thing that I don't understand, and I have yet to hear a peep about this, is as we debate the guns versus butter aspects of this budget bill, and whether or not the Trump tax cuts should be codified, and whether with more money for immigration enforcement and defense and all that, why is there no discussion about tweaking all of that to perhaps limit the detrimental effects on Medicaid and the SNAP program and other things that we unfortunately have come to rely upon, both in West Virginia and nationally. Well, you know, the tax rate for corporations was cut under the Trump bill from 35% to 21%. Do you notice you never hear anybody coming forward and saying, well, maybe they ought to go up to 23%, and we can ameliorate some of the negative effects of this bill on the deficit, on the debt, and on some of the social safety net programs we have. You never hear any discussion about that whatsoever. And I fear that's because it takes hard work to do that. They'd rather have an all or nothing approach, and I don't understand that.
Now back to you, David. I'm sorry, Larry.
Yeah. There's a couple of things here. One of them is just recently the parliamentarian has gone through the bill, as we discussed briefly, and taken some non-budgetary things out under a thing called, remarkably enough, the Byrd Rule, which says you can't take a bunch of policy issues and load them into what is a budget reconciliation bill unless, you know, the whole idea of budget reconciliation is filibusters not allowed. Okay, well, if we're taking the filibuster away, then you can't stick a bunch of Mickey Mouse policy changes in there. You have to deal with the budget. They've actually made it simpler in that way, even though the reason some of those things were in there were to get certain votes to come their way who didn't like the financial portion of the bill but wanted some kind of a gimme. Now they've taken that out. It at least makes the bill slightly shorter. There's for example, a thing in there that says that judges can no longer issue national injunctions, federal judges. And that's a very interesting thing that has nothing to do with reconciling the national budget and shouldn't be in there. It doesn't sound like they're going to push back too hard or fire the parliamentarian like they were talking about a couple days ago. It sounds like it's going to go through. And so now the question is going to be, and this may be to the chagrin of some of the opponents on the Republican side, now the question's going to be on the table. Josh Hawley and these other people are faced with voting to do what we talked about earlier in the show, bankrupt their hospital system in their state. And nobody wants to vote to bankrupt their hospital system in the state once the voters understand that that's what your vote means. And of course, what they would like is to be able to do the vote and have that pop up later, much later, hopefully. You know, they did delay the cuts and all that stuff, I believe. There's one provision is until May of 26 or something. So they're trying to get by this, but of course May of 26 is the middle of an election year. So that's all going to be very interesting. I don't think they can get it done by July 4th without some huge changes, and I don't think they can get those changes done by July 4th. You know, the Medicaid the Medicaid cuts, which the Senate's version actually worsens and makes stronger in the sense of cutting even more money from rural hospitals, especially are going to be hard for people like Hawley, Lisa Murkowski, hopefully Shelley Moore Capito, and others to swallow, because that is a direct punch in the face to their voters.
Yeah, I believe this bill passes and on time, and I'm not going to approve of that myself because there are some provisions of this bill that I find flat out frightening. Larry, you mentioned the restrictions on the courts. The 10-year freeze on states to regulate AI is incredibly short-sighted, and I think that's as dangerous as we don't know anywhere. Nobody knows 2 years from now what the world's going to be like as AI continues to further infiltrate everything that we do. And to restrict states' abilities to regulate it for 10 years, it could be too late before you even have. By the time you realize what has happened, it's too late to do anything about it. The other aspect of this bill that I just strongly disapprove of is it gives the president the sole authority to restructure of every level of the federal government, including federal employees in every agency, every single agency, to one person. And whether you like Trump or don't like Trump, this is troubling to me because it's more king power, which is not the way this was set up. It was not set up to give one person the power to be the king, to have all the authority to do everything. This is another example of Congress just completely giving up what its job is. So regardless of who the president is right now, I think it's just an atrocious aspect of this bill. My thoughts on that. Now we go to Mike Carl, for issue number 5.
Okay, back to the budget bill in another angle. The 2017 broad-based across the board, but broad-based income tax rate cuts led to increased federal revenue because of the stimulus effect of the rate cuts. And so my question is, if they don't extend them, and they need to functionally, they can't just do nothing. They've got to affirmatively extend them and make them permanent. If they don't do that, what will that do to federal revenue?
You're asking people to do math, Mike. Let's go to Mike Height first.
Well, I think it's what you're proposing here has to do with an economic policy and philosophy and whether you buy into it or not. I believe it. I believe you cut the rates, you raise the revenues. I believe in that. And I know you do as well, and which I think is the impetus of your question. I don't know that everybody believes that. So there are going to be some that say, no, this is not the way to go, where I believe you're absolutely right. You have to keep those cuts in place. Those are good for the economy. I believe in trickle-down economics. I believe it works. But you're going to get a lot of argument. There's going to be people who say, no, it doesn't work, and you're just hurting people by doing that. I think there's evidence to support our position. But I think there's also good people that say there isn't also.
Remember, our position is coming from a former state tax commissioner and a graduate of the Yale Law School. Just saying.
That's why I'm with you, Mike.
All right, Mr. Schultz, trickle-down economics.
Yeah. At the same time, we saw that miraculous raise in revenues. We saw a 4-year presidency which ran the largest deficits in American history. $8.2 trillion over 4 years. It increased the national debt by 25%.
Can you say COVID?
Yeah, COVID, the last 9 months.
That's when the deficit started.
No. No. He was never anywhere near.
That's when it got worse. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You can't spend $8.2 trillion in 9 months. Not even our government can do that.
Yeah, and they were blowing through money left and right. So as the revenues increased, the costs run by this Republican president shot through the roof. COVID. And we're going to see they shot through the roof in 2017, 18, 19, and also in 20 after COVID began. But I didn't even know what the word COVID meant. I had never heard the word COVID until about February or March of 2020. That was the last 9 months, 10 months, I guess, of Donald Trump's first term. So you had all kinds of time for this 2017 tax cut to return us to a Bill Clinton balanced budget, and you did just the opposite. It blew it up. They're the largest deficits ever. So I suspect that what they're looking to do, and boy, this bill seems to indicate that what they're looking to do is the same doggone thing all over again.
Joe Ferretti.
Well, Mike Carl, as a statement of fact, when you cut taxes, revenues do go up. Everything I've read supports that notion, so I'm not going to quarrel with you on that. I think the other question is, do the tax cuts pay for themselves? In other words, do the revenues rise enough to cover the loss of revenue that is projected to occur because of the tax cuts themselves? And that, to me, is a more difficult question.
It's no question the net revenue
Mike,
went up.
You got to let him finish his point.
Yeah. Net, I'm not sure, because Mike, you get into some real gray areas here. For example, when you cut social safety net programs and your constituents' health suffers, long term, they put off health care. They don't go to the dentist. They don't go to the doctor because the Medicaid funds aren't there to pay for those services. Then those people have serious health problems down the road that cost us a lot more. So it's a very complicated equation to determine whether or not the tax cuts eventually pay for themselves. But as a principle, in terms of raising revenue, yes, I think there's a stimulative effect when people pay less taxes. I think that's undeniable. But long term, I think it's a more difficult question.
David Valente.
Yeah, I mean, Washington's never had a revenue problem. Like the money comes in. We raise lots of money. The problem with Washington is the spending, and that we, when those dollars come in, we need to find a place to send them, and usually it's to collected or to connected people's pockets. We need to I'm in favor of tax cuts to get the money out of Washington, because you're never going to get the greed and power out of Washington. You get the money out of Washington. It's not for performative to raise more revenues. In my mind, it's to get the power out of Washington, to return it to the people, to let them vote with their dollars, because that's the most significant vote that you make, is the ones that you make with your dollars. And consequently enough, U.S. consumer spending was unexpectedly down more than expected in May. I just saw that roll through on Reuters. I don't know whatever we do with the tax code off of this big, beautiful bill, the way the economy is being impacted, especially with the threats of tariffs and the shrinkage of the economy, we're probably fall short on revenue projections anyway, because we're killing ourselves economically with everything that the Trump administration is doing right now.
Comes back to you, Mr. Carl.
Well, I appreciate the nuances that have been raised in response to my statement, but I think inherently it stimulates the economy. But you're right, other kinds of spending can absorb not just the increased revenue, but revenue we don't even have, and there's more debt. So it's not just a one, cut the taxes and everything's great. You got to watch the spending. I agree.
Yeah. If we used that theory, if we take a look at it, so there's been 3 two-term Republican presidents in my lifetime, right? So Reagan, Bush 43, and now Trump. Okay, although his is obviously a split term. And when you look at those 3, and all 3 administrations featured tax cuts. All 3 administrations also featured a growing debt. So the equation of cut taxes, it'll grow revenue, and that'll help shrink the debt has not proven to be true in any of these 3 presidential terms. Trump's got another 3+ years, so we'll see how that math works out. But to this point, Mike, there's no evidence that cutting taxes leads to a balanced budget or reduced deficit. It may lead to increasing revenues, but we don't live in an increasing revenues world. We live in a world where we have a large growing debt and deficit.
That's only because wasteful spending goes up. It doesn't have to go up. That's a separate issue.
But it goes
and
up.
but that's the world we live in.
Under
Well,
both administrations.
we've seen that.
But that's the world we live in, though.
When Reagan lowered the taxes, the amount of pork they had to do to get that over the line,
To get votes, to buy votes.
to buy votes, was especially the reason why that blew up the budget deficit. Now, not to the level that Donald Trump did. Donald Trump was on a record pace before COVID started, for a 4-year term. COVID was, we lumped 2 separate stimulus bills of $2 trillion under his administration, and then the $4 trillion of market liquidization that the Reserve did just blew up our cost of living because there's too much money in the markets.
We have final thoughts, 8 seconds apiece. Get them ready. Coming up after these. Final thoughts on the phone. Joe Ferretti first.
Have y'all noticed I'm never muted when Rob prompts me to plug the law firm?
Larry Schultz.
I wasn't going to say it, but yes, in fact, I had noted it on my notes every day. It's going to be.
Well, that was your 8 seconds, Larry.
It's going to be very cool.
David Valente.
NHL draft tonight. We'll see how my Buffalo Sabres disappoint me once again.
Penguins have the 11th and 12th overall first-round pick. Mr. Carl.
Cards are struggling a little bit, but they're still ahead of the Pirates.
Everybody's ahead of the Pirates except the Colorado Rockies. Michael.
As you're considering what to do this summer, consider West Virginia and many of the beautiful resorts we have here in West Virginia.
Chelsea Ruby right there, huh? Hey, the Dave Ramsey Show is coming up next. Have a great weekend. This is Talk Radio, WRNR Martinsburg and TV 10, and we'll talk again in 70. Sure.